Part 1 of Poems for My Children by Anne HAWKSHAW. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Poems for My Children by Mrs. HAWKSHAW. London, Simpkin Marshall and Company. Manchester, Sims and Dinham, 1847. Spring is coming. Mary's Wish. The festival of the last of October, seen in the time of the Druids. Common things. Spring is coming. There is a whisper in the woods, the breath of soft winds passing through, and rustling mid the dry brown leaves where last year's primrose grew. And high upon the leafless boughs blithe robin cheerily is singing, and to and fro the anemones like fairy bells are swinging. The rivulet is murmuring within its pebbly bed, for the ice bands which held it fast with the last sunshine fled, and many coloured lichens creep o'er the old trees and stones. There are 1,000 pleasant sights, 1,000 gladsome tones. For spring is coming, and the flowers will waken as from sleep. The birds will warble in the bowers, in streams the fishes leap. The butterflies will flutter past, the bees begin their humming. Cold winter does not ever last, spring, pleasant spring is coming. Mary's Wish. I often wish that I could see this country as it used to be, for where now busy cities stand, there once was moor and forest land, and the tall elk and freedom bounded ere hunter's bugle had been sounded. How quiet must these shores have been where now 1,000 ships are seen. There was no sound of steam or oar, scarcely a footprint on the shore, and the sea-eagle from the cliff soared startled at the passing skiff. Where quay and workhouse crowd the edge of rivers, once mid reeds and sedge, the otter watched his fishy prey, with none to frighten him away, unless a tall grey heron came, its share of booty too to claim. Where now the wavy cornfields spread, once stood the Britons' mud-built shed, and round it savage children played, while stretched beneath the oak tree's shade. Their father strung his bow afresh, or in his fish-net wove a mesh. Where now such peaceful dwellings are, were heard the sounds of barbarous war, and mothers with their children fled at midnight from the burning shed. The smoke from engines now is seen, where blazing hamlets once had been. I do not think that time was good, for then men shed each other's blood, without a thought that it was wrong, and the weak fell beneath the strong. But still, I often wish to see this country as it used to be. The festival of the last of October, seen in the time of the Druids. The Druids in Britain had 3 great festivals, one on the eve of the 1st of May, the second at midsummer, and the third on the last of October, which was kept as a thanksgiving for the harvest. Before this festival, all fire used in private dwellings or for common uses was put out, but sacred fire was kept burning with great care on the altar. At the festival, no excommunicated person was allowed to take fire from the altar, and all were forbidden to give the outcast food, fire, or shelter. Upon a wide and lonely moor there is a circle of old stones. The summer sunshine warms them yet, the winter wind among them moans. Sometimes a passing stranger comes and sits him down beside that spot, and muses there on times gone by, and things by busier men forgot. Why there do strangers sit and think? What are the scenes they muse upon? Who placed with so much labour there those huge grey stones in ages gone? Come, listen. 'Twas an autumn eve, misty and cold, and all around was cheerless, but amid yon stones a single fire gleamed near the ground. Awhile it glimmered faint and dim, then burst at last a ruddy flame, showing to those across the wild it from a Druid's altar came. Beside it stood a white-robed priest, with oak leaves twined around his head, while near him, bound with leathern thongs, upon the ground a savage bled. We call him savage, for he knew nothing of all these arts of ours. Yet by his mud hut far away there grew a root of primrose flowers, which he had brought for many a mile and planted there to please his child, for well he loved his little one, although he was both rude and wild. But vainly now that boy may call, he never, never can come back, and vainly all through wood and heath his faithful hound his way may track. They did not kill him in revenge, he did not fall in angry strife. The man who slew him till that day had never seen him in his life. They offered him in sacrifice, a victim for a nation's crimes, believing thus their gods to please. This was religion in those times. At last the sacrifice was o'er. Then each of the vast crowd drew near, and stood around the altar fire, with looks of reverence but of fear. Each at the flame then lit a torch, and quickly to his home returned, for till that festival was o'er, no fire on any hearthstone burned. That morning, watched with ceaseless care, fire burned upon the altar stone, but none besides throughout the land, from temple or from cottage shone. The priest, the worshippers are gone, but one remains, a lonely man, seated by a blasted tree, to death doomed by the Druids' ban. No cheerful fire for him must blaze, no food, no home to him be given, for he had dared to disobey the priest, the messenger of heaven. A while he sat, then fierce despair possessed him, and he wildly ran to the dark forest, and no more was heard or seen that doomed man. Common things. The sunshine is a glorious thing that comes alike to all, lighting the peasant's lowly cot, the noble's painted hall. The moonlight is a gentle thing, it through the window gleams, upon the snowy pillow where the happy infant dreams. It shines upon the fisher's boat, out on the lonely sea, or where the little lambkins lie beneath the old oak tree. The dewdrops on the summer morn sparkle upon the grass, the village children brush them off that through the meadows pass. There are no gems in monarchs' crowns more beautiful than they, and yet we scarcely notice them, but tread them off in play. Poor Robin on the pear tree sings, beside the cottage door, the heath flower fills the air with sweets upon the pathless moor. There are as many lovely things, as many pleasant tones, for those who sit by cottage hearths, as those who sit on thrones. End of Part 1. Part 2 of Poems for My Children by Anne Hawkshaw. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Little Wanderers. The Wind. The Little Wanderers. Part 1. The Resolve. 'Twas morning, and the valleys lay still in the mountain's shade, while near a Switzer's cottage door 2 little children played. One was a gentle girl, whose face was bright with health and joy, though birds and streams were all her books, a flower her only joy. She sat upon a log of wood, pleased with her rustic seat. A little basket full of flowers was placed beside her feet. The other was a noble boy, with forehead broad and high, and eyes that looked from their clear depths like stars from out the sky. He was a brave and fearless child, yet modest, kind, and meek. But how a tale of wrong would flush with crimson his young cheek! Their father on the mountain heights hunted the chamois wild, and often told of daring feats before his listening child. And Pierre's young eyes would sparkle then. "I'll be a hunter too." He shook his curly locks and said, "Father, and do like you." Pierre climbed the cliffs and brought the flowers to Ella where she sat, while she with slender fingers twined them round his rustic hat. She lifted up her mild blue eyes to where the mountains lay, all glittering in the thousand lights of a bright summer's day. "All beautiful that land must be, all glittering and all fair," she softly whispered to herself. "I wish that we were there. I wonder if 'tis fairies' land, and if they light it so that little ones like Pierre and I may see the way to go. They love good children, and I'm sure that Pierre is very good. He walked with me last night an hour to seek flowers in the wood, although he likes to climb the cliffs better than gather flowers, or seek the falcon's nest, than walk like me through woodland bowers." While thus she whispered to herself, the flowers dropped from her hand, and earnestly her eyes were bent on that far-off fairy land. "Ella, you have not wreathed my hat. The flowers are all around. What makes you look so wonderingly up to your mountain ground?" "Oh, Pierre," the little one replied, "it's so bright and grand. The rocks must all be made of gems. It must be fairyland." Pierre looked and saw the morning sun gleaming on peaks of snow, and lower down the crystal streams from hidden fountains flow. He almost heard the torrents gush and the proud eagles cry, as with a slow majestic flight it sought its nest on high. And his heart bounded at the sight, and he too longed to climb, not to seek Ella's fairyland, but mountain cliffs sublime. Pierre seized his hat, bedecked with flowers. "I'll go, I'm sure we can," and with his sister's hand in his, away they swiftly ran. Part II. The Avalanche. Down the green slope they swiftly ran, on which their cottage stood, crossed at the foot a little brook, then passed into a wood. They lingered not to gather flowers or watch the squirrel leap, for now they heard the torrent fall into its basin deep. From age to age, from rock to rock, it fell with thundering sound, and balls like snow of shining foam were scattered all around. They gazed awhile with trembling awe up to the rocky ledge o'er which it fell, and then began to clamber by its edge. From bush to bush and stone to stone o'ergrown with moss they went, and sometimes o'er the dangerous cliff the fearless children bent. An eagle screaming left its nest and rose into the sky. A wild goat o'er the torrent leaped and passed them swiftly by. All was so new and strange and wild, they gazed delighted round, till suddenly their ears were stunned by a terrific sound. It was not thunder, yet it seemed to shake the very earth, and high amid the mountain peaks it had its sudden birth. Clasped in each other's arms they stood, their rosy cheeks turned white, and as the sound yet louder grew, they held each other tight. Poor Ella closed her fearful eyes, but Pierre still dared to look up to the mountain's snowy heights, though all around him shook. "Noise will not hurt us, sister dear," the daring brother cried. "I hear it still, I hear it now, come down the mountain side. I see it too, an avalanche. Look, Ella, look and see. 'Thas broken now a piece of rock, now it has crushed a tree. Look how it bears the stones along, and tears up tree and bush. Now from yon overhanging cliff 'twill like a torrent rush. It has, and it has reached the plain and plunged into the lake. Then we are safe. Ah, Ella, no, the lake its bounds may break." The avalanche had fallen where the lake and river met, and fiercely now against its base the chafed waters beat, and swiftly spread across the plain, and all before them swept. the shepherd left his sheep and fled, or in some cavern crept. Onward it spread, till all the vale became one watery plain, which rolled between them and the home they longed to now regain. They saw it on its sunny slope, their parents were not there, and not a creature was in sight to witness their despair. A distant sound of dying cries was borne upon the breeze, mixed with a roar of waves and noise of crashing rocks and trees. Poor Ella wept in wild despair, then sunk upon the ground, while Pierre, by danger calmer made, looked earnestly around. "Sister," he said, "come, dry your tears, they will not help us now." There was a something in his tone, a something on his brow, that made her feel she must be calm. She had a spirit too, though meek, yet full of fortitude, to bear, if not to do. "We cannot now return," he said, "but we must try to find our way behind that mountain cliff to which the sun inclined, when yesternight we watched him set, and should we lose our way, then we must creep into some cave and wait till coming day. Have you not heard our father tell how in the olden time, when cruel tyrants ruled the land, and there was war and crime, how many good and holy men, women and children too, were forced to fly and hide in caves? What they did we can do." He took his sister's hand in his, and down they bent their way. Quickly they went, there was no time for lingering or delay. The sun, already in mid-heaven, betokened it was noon, and the deep valleys they must pass they knew would darken soon. They wandered on from hour to hour, and hope the time beguiled, but stranger all the mountains grew, and wilder still and wild. They from each other kept their fears, impelled by love or pride, till Ella, without cry or tear, sank lifeless at his side. Part 3. The Cave in the Mountains. A little distant from the spot where Ella fainting lay, there was a cavern which had oft in persecution's day hidden from the oppressor's power, till brighter days returned, the brave and good within whose hearts pure noble thoughts had burned. 'Twas known to many a peasant child, for round the winter's fire they talked of those whose memories with time would not expire. The Cave of Liberty 'twas called by those who lived around, and many a hunter trod the spot as if 'twere holy ground. And so it was, more sacred far than aught beneath the sun should ever be to us the place where noble deeds were done. Bright crystals pendant from the roof like glittering diamonds gleamed, when on them at the evening's hour a ray of sunlight streamed. The sound of hidden waters came upon the ear all times, low, soft and musical it came like distant tinkling chimes. Dry moss and withered leaves were driven in autumn by the wind, in sheltered corners of the cave a resting place to find. A heap of these, which might have been a lonely hermit's bed, upon a low flat shelf of rock last autumn's wind had spread. Upon them Pierre his sister laid, for he had seen the place, and in his hand pure water brought, and sprinkled on her face. He watched beside her, till at length she opened her blue eyes, and gazed upon the sparry vault with innocent surprise. But she was faint, and closed them soon, and the low lulling sound of winds and waters once again her eyes in slumber bound. Unconscious of approaching night, o'er-wearied thus she slept, whilst watching the fast fading light, Pierre his sad station kept. He sat till on the cavern's roof the sunbeams died away. He sat till in the western sky there lingered not a ray. He watched, still darker it became, long shades the mountains threw, the night wind made its mournful tone, and bats and owlets flew. "O God," he said, and bent his knees upon the rock and prayed, "O God, preserve thy children safe, and make us not afraid. The dark and light are one to thee, and thou canst see us here, amongst these rocks, as when we rest at home without a fear. Elijah was by ravens fed, when by the brook he sat, and God can feed us even here. Oh, I am sure of that. Just then, before the cavern's mouth, he saw a creature pass. With noiseless step it quickly ran across the dewy grass. What was it? Wolf or bear? Ah, now what could the brave boy do? 'Twas vain alike to fight or fly, to Ella's side he flew. Resolved its victim first to be, he took his station there, while she, in happy slumbers wrapped, knew nought of his despair. Nearer it came, then with a bound leaped wildly on his breast. The scream of agony he gave roused Ella from her rest. She started up, but wolf nor bear met her awakening sight, but springing from her couch she gave a cry of wild delight. It was her father's faithful dog, and in a moment more their weeping parents knelt beside their children on the floor. The father bore his little girl safe down the mountain side, but Pierre walked manfully along at his glad mother's side. The wind. The wind, it is a mystic thing, wandering o'er ocean wide, and fanning all the thousand sails that o'er its billows glide. It curls the blue waves into foam, it snaps the strongest mast. Then, like a sorrowing thing, it sighs when the wild storm is past. And yet, how gently does it come at evening through the bowers, as if it said a kind good night to all the closing flowers. It bears the perfume of the rose, it fans the insect's wing. 'Tis round me, with me, everywhere, yet 'tis an unseen thing. How many sounds it bears along, as o'er the earth it goes, the songs of many joyous hearts, the sounds of many woes. It enters into palace halls, and carries thence the sound of mirth and music, but it creeps the narrow prison round, and bears away the captive's sigh, who sits in sorrow there, or from the martyr's lonely cell conveys his evening prayer. It fans the reaper's heated brow, it through the window creeps, and lifts the fair child's golden curls as on her couch she sleeps. 'Tis like the light, a gift to all, to prince, to peasant given. Awake, asleep, around us still, there is this gift of heaven. This strange mysterious thing we call the breeze, the air, the wind. We call it so, but know no more, 'tis mystery, like our mind. Think not the things most wonderful are those beyond our ken, for wonders are around the paths, the daily paths of men. End of Part 2. Part 3 of Poems for My Children by Anne Hawkshaw. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Scene in the time of the Romans, the city child's complaint, the first spring flowers, to Editha, Editha, the oak tree, I do not love the night, thinking and dreaming. Scene in the time of the Romans. The Druids' time had passed away, and moored a Roman galley lay 'neath England's chalky cliffs, and barks of firmer texture skim gaily upon the ocean's brim than Britain's wicker skiffs. For many years did Britons fight for hearth and home and freeman's right, but 'twas in vain they bled. The Romans in that conquering hour had met with none to check their power. They were the wide earth's dread. Yet from their conquerors much of good, for all this loss of human blood, the hardy Britons learned. The mud-walled town had disappeared, and in its place were mansions reared, and peaceful days returned. Now from that galley to the shore there came a boat with dashing oar. At length it touched the strand. From it a stately warrior stepped. Upon the shore his followers leapt, with sword and spear in hand. To meet him was a motley crowd, and from it rose a shout so loud 'twas heard for miles at sea. He was a ruler come from Rome. Many from him shall hear their doom. For life and death bore he. Upon the cliff a temple stood, raised to the monarch of the flood. To this the Roman went, and offered there, at Neptune's shrine, a cup which British pearls entwine, and there his knee he bent. Next he his high tribunal kept. Many that fateful council wept, led from his bar to die. Some from their native isle were sent in sad and lonely banishment, some to the forests fly. Now marching past his seat appears a band of British youths. Fond tears from mothers' eyes had wept their fate, for they were bound to distant climes, destined to fight for Roman crimes, with men they did not hate. At last the sunset of that day died in the western sky away. Then to his splendid tent, where silken cushions for his bed were on a floor of mosaic spread, the Roman general went. The City Child's Complaint. The trees and flowers are beautiful, the sky is blue and high, and the small streams make pleasant sounds as they run swiftly by. But all these things are not for me. I live amid dark walls, and scarcely through these dusty panes a single sunbeam falls. I never hear the wild bird's song, or see the graceful deer go trooping through the forest glades. What can I learn from here? They say God's works are wonderful in sea and sky and land. I never see them, for men's works are here on every hand. Oh, murmur not, thou little one, that here thy home must be, and not amid the pleasant fields or by the greenwood tree. There is a voice can speak to thee amid the works of men. Speak with a sound as loud and clear as in the lonely glen. Do not the works thou seest around spring from man's thoughtful mind, and in that is there naught of God for thee, for all to find? The earth with all its varied blooms will have to pass away, but man's immortal mind will live through everlasting day. And without mind these sheltering walls around thee had not been, these busy engines had not moved, nor whirling wheels been seen. The first spring flowers. Bring me a nosegay. Where shall I go? For short is the time since melted the snow. Go to the garden's warmest bed. There the bright crocus flowers are spread, yellow and purple and white, while between shoot up their lance-like leaves of green. Go to the sunniest bank you can find, where the hedgerow keeps off the frosty wind, where a faint sweet perfume fills the air. Search, you will find the violet there, of stainless white, or of a hue deeper than Italy's sky of blue. Go look beneath the forest trees for those fairy bells, the anemones, gracefully bending to every gale their feathery leaves and blossoms pale, and pass not on the unsheltered height the flowers of the winter aconite. And forget not the laurestinas gay, with blossoms for March like those of May. Gather a sprig of ivy too, though flowerless now, yet I love its bright hue, that does not fade like the summer flowers, but looks like a friend through wintry hours. A kindly friend who seems to say, I have come on this frosty winter's day, when I thought all others would stay away. To Editha. The dew is on the grass, and the bird is in its nest. Come, Editha, my little one, and lie thee down to rest. Sleep, thou mayest calmly sleep. No dreams of coming ill, no thought of misspent hours, no fears thy happy bosom fill. Yet thou wilt dream, but not of joys for ever fled, no envy at another's lot, no sorrow for the dead. but of the flowers and bees and butterflies of spring, and pleasant voices that have made thy nursery walls to ring. The dew is on the grass, and the bird is in its nest. Come, Editha, my blessed gift, and lie thee down to rest. Editha is a Saxon name, and means the blessed gift. Editha. One evening little Editha sat by a forest well, and she heard a low and pleasant tone, like the chime of a silver bell. And she looked around, but nought could she see, yet it was not the wind through the forest tree. She did not say like a foolish child, I'll listen no more, but she bent her head, and she heard the same soft silvery sound floating around beneath her tread. If she ceased to listen, it went away, or if she forgot it and thought of play. Then meekly little Editha knelt down upon the ground, and a root of blue forget-me-not close by the water found, and waving to and fro it said, think of the absent and the dead. Marvelled much the little maid, but she bent again her ear, and she heard a happy voice from a yellow primrose near, and it said, be cheerful still, hope and wait and do God's will. From its home amid dry leaves, fallen there from many a tree, I can ring a fairy chime, said the wood anemone. And so can I, the snowdrop said, waving to and fro her head. Then the flowers began to sing, and the bells in concert ring. Happy little Editha, she can hear our voiceless singing. We no more are mute to her, music ever round her ringing. Many on this wondrous earth never hear its harmony. Blessed little Editha, it no more is dumb to thee. The Oak Tree. The oak, it is a noble tree, the monarch of the wood. Through winter's storms 1,000 years its hardy trunk hath stood. It is not stately like the beech, the elm more tall may be, and gracefuller the lovely lime. Yet 'tis a noble tree. An acorn by a squirrel dropped amid a tuft of grass may be an oak on which we look with wonder as we pass. But then it years, long years must grow, and this may teach to all what mighty things in after times may come from means now small. How little did they think who saw a green oak sapling spring in some old forest long ago, that it would float a king. Perhaps some ancient Druid came to pluck it from a bough. 'Tis now a gallant ship, but he, where is that Druid now? Perhaps an acorn from that tree dropped on his nameless grave, and o'er it now in summer green dark tangled branches wave. How beautiful the oak's young leaves in the bright days of spring, or when a richer tint the skies of early autumn bring. And all upon the dewy ground the acorn cups are laid, like richly chased spoons are they, for fairy banquets made. So, monarch of all forest trees, on every English plain, we crown thee still, thou brave old oak, and long, long be thy reign. I do not love the night. I do not love the night, mamma, the long, dark, dreary night. The day is far more beautiful, with its beams of sunny light. I know the darkness on the sky like a thick curtain spreads, that we may all more calmly sleep like flowers upon their beds. For you say the young flowers fold their buds when the night comes o'er the sky. I often think they grieve, mamma, to bid the sun good-bye. There is no sound of song or wing from bird, no insect's hum, all pleasant voices too are hushed, and all the world seems dumb. The night wind as it goes along like mournful music seems. I often think I hear it still go past me in my dreams. I do not love the night, mamma, the chilly darksome night. How beautiful would be a world where it was always light. And such a world there is, my boy, no sun, no moon are there. Yet 'tis a land that hath no night. Where is it? Tell me where. It is the land of blessedness, the home of all the good. We cannot travel to its shores by land or other flood. To reach it we must die, my boy, yet tremble not for this. Kind angels wait to show the way to that bright land of bliss. Thinking and dreaming. You tell me I must think. I thought last night a long, long time, as I sat listening on the hill to the church bell's pleasant chime. The sun shone on the old church clock upon the ivy tower, 7 when I went, 8 when I left. So I sat there an hour, and I was thinking all the time how pleasant it would be to live on a little isle far in the southern sea, with waters like a mirror clear all round my island spread, and branching trees and sun-bright flowers, and blue skies overhead. And I would have a cottage there beside the sounding sea. Rich vines should cluster o'er its roof and on its sheltering tree, and pretty pictures I would have, and books and music too, and I would play or read or sing, or roam the forest through. And sometimes I would have a friend to come and see me there. Oh, should not I be happy then, with all around so fair? No, Mary, not more happy there than in thy present lot. For the chief source of happiness, my child, thou hast forgot. A life of selfish indolence for us was not designed. It is not places make our bliss, 'tis fashioned by the mind. Think in that path of life thou tread'st, thy duty well to do. 'Tis dreaming to imagine flowers thus on that path to strew. I told thee thou must think. Not thought, but only idle dreams are all these fairy, cloud-built homes and visionary schemes. They will not nerve thy heart to bear the many storms of life, nor arm thy heart with cheerfulness to smile amid its strife. Leave in His hands thy destiny, who guides the swallow's flight. A God of love will surely do to all His creatures right. End of Part 3. Part 4 of Poems for My Children by Anne HAWKSHAW. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. King Alfred and his mother are seen in the time of the Saxons. The angel friend, the stream, the poor fly for my little Harry, the land of my dreams, the history of a coral islet, the hermit, the chieftain and the child, a tale about happiness, God is love. King Alfred and his mother are seen in the time of the Saxons. The Saxons or Northmen began to invade Britain before the departure of the Romans, and after much fighting obtained possession of it. This was not a misfortune but a happiness, as they were better fitted to rule the land than the Britons, who had become idle. Although Alfred could not read until he was 12 years of age, he afterwards became a learned man, and wrote many books to improve his people. He was called the Truth-Teller. Was it not a noble title, my child? And now we will take a peep into the old palace where he lived so many ages ago. It was a winter's evening, and fast the snow was falling. The shepherd on the mountainside his wandering sheep was calling. The weary ox had left the field, and to its shed was wending. Each man and beast that had a home, back to that home was tending. There sat a lady in rich attire, that evening by a blazing fire, that burnt within an antique hall. Rude tapestry hung upon its wall, which oft the night wind swayed and shook, entering by many an unseen nook. She sat and played upon her harp, and pleasantly its music rung, while the blazing faggots cast a glow on the gifted lady as she sung, and glanced and sparkled here and there on spear and buckler round her hung. It was a wild Norse song she sung, of the old Valhalla's mystic hall, where the souls of valiant heroes go at Odin's call, and she sung of the rugged Jotuns too, the giants of frost and fire and flame, and many a tale of ice-bound Thule that now we Iceland name. She told how the daring sea-kings roved in their frail vessels o'er the sea, until they reached the English shore, its future kings to be. Then the lady ceased her song, and she put her harp away, when she heard a voice say, "Would those tones ever upon the air would stay! Would that music ne'er would die, or deep words into silence fly!" "Alfred, is it thou?" she said. "Sighest that my song is done? True, the harp chords now are hushed, but the song still lives, my son." "Yes, it lives, but not for me," said the boy. "When words are hid in books, they are like precious gems locked down beneath a casket's lid to him who cannot read the line. And lady, such a lot is mine." "My son," she said, "this book shall be thine own when thou canst read to me its songs of ancient melody." "It shall be mine, and soon." How well he kept his word, let history tell. But you must tell me who were Odin and the Jotuns, and what was the Valhalla that the Queen sung of to little Alfred. Odin was a famous leader and king that the Northmen once had. He governed them wisely and well, and when he died they thought he could still protect them and do them good, and they worshipped him as a god. And the Valhalla was a hall where he dwelt, and where he feasted those who during their lifetime had been brave and good. The Jotuns were giants. Perhaps they meant frost and fire and flame by these giants, because they are powerful and mysterious things, about whose nature we know little. The Angel Friend. Mother, do angels ever come from their starry home on high? Do they ever wander down to earth, those dwellers in the sky? How sweet to have an angel friend, who would come to the mortals' land, and tell us what they do in heaven, that bright and holy band. To tell of the crystal streams which flow by the fadeless trees of life, and the fresh and fragrant winds which blow without the tempest's strife. And to tell me, if those indeed are worlds that in the midnight sky seem but like shining specks of light when seen by mortal eye. For angels know 1,000 things we do not know on earth, for they have lived through countless years and watched creation's birth. They saw the lovely Eden bowers which our first parents trod, the Hebrews o'er Arabia's sands led by the cloud of God. They've seen great cities turn to dust and people pass away, Chaldea's stately palaces all trodden into clay. They saw where Jesus bowed in prayer on a mount in lonely glen. They know where many a martyr died far from the homes of men. Oh, sweet to have an angel friend with a heart all full of love, to bring down to this lower world the bliss from that above. The Stream. Oh, is there aught more beautiful than the clear stream in its bed, with the willows whispering on its banks, and the blue sky o'er it spread? It cometh from its mountain home, like the snow, so pure, so cold, its home but passed by the mountain goat, or the chamois hunter bold. Like a slender line of silver sheen, when the sunbeams on it play, it looks, as down the mountain side it taketh its lonely way. 'Tis one of the strings of nature's harp, and it seems to bear along the tones of many a silent voice and many an olden song. For its gentle music hath been heard, sounding by night and day, long years ere up that rocky path the peasant took his way. And the merry trout shall find a home within its waters clear, as on its course it still shall flow for many a coming year. The Poor Fly, for my little Harry. Once there was a little fly dancing on a window pane, and naughty Harry made it die, and it will never dance again. Poor little fly with gauzy wings, it liked to flutter in the sun, and sleep within the curtain folds when its merry game was done. It had its pleasures and its pains, though but an insect of a day. It had a right to live, and you no right to take its life away. Land of my dreams. I know there are sunny lands that lie beneath the blue of a southern sky, where the sea and the earth alike are fair, and the fragrant citron scents the air, and the vine twines o'er the trellised bowers, and the jessamine spreads its starry flowers. But there is a fairer land to me than even the clime of Italy. There are beautiful islands which seem to sleep in the midst of the great Pacific deep, where the cocoa-nut grows to the ocean's brink, and its roots the waves' salt waters drink, where from sandy shore to mountain height there is one mass of verdure bright. But I know more lovely isles than those that on the southern sea repose. There are strange temples built of yore on sultry Egypt's wondrous shore, where, buried in the desert sand, are idols of that ancient land where Hebrew slaves in sorrow passed long years. All there is old and vast. Strange things are those, but yet to me is a land of deeper mystery. 'Tis the land to which I go in dreams, more lovely far than earth it seems. In a boat of cloud I seem to glide, in a boundless space so new and wide, and all I have loved on earth are there, and all I have seen, but far more fair. As a lovely place in the sunshine seems, it ever looks, that land of dreams. Mother, how can it be, when sleep closes my eyelids in slumber deep, and the soft pillow rests my head, and darkness o'er the world is spread, that I can see these glorious things? Is it my spirit that hath wings, and can it leave this mortal frame, and go to God from whence it came? I cannot tell thee, child, to me as to thyself 'tis mystery, for 'tis but little we can know, while in this life we stay below. The wonders of our souls are known to God, and but to him alone. I cannot tell thee where may fly the soul in dreams, to know it we must die. The history of a coral islet. Ages ago, beneath the deep, the coral insects reared their stony homes upon the rocks, nor storms nor billows feared. They laboured with unceasing toil, those million tiny things, and they have built more lasting homes than palaces of kings. Long as the waters o'er them rolled, their labours did not cease, but when they reached the ocean's brim, they sunk to death in peace. The seaweed and the floating plank from some bark washed away, the bamboo and uprooted palm soon on the islet lay. Borne by the winds or on the waves, seeds, fruits, and insects came, until a fairy spot it beamed, that isle without a name. Each year more lovely than the last its solitudes appeared. Sweet flowers were there, and cocoa trees their lofty heads upreared. The pelican upon the shore watched for his fishy prey, while lurking in the tangled grass the glittering serpent lay. The waves a ceaseless murmur made upon the pebbly shore, but not a sound of human life the wandering breezes bore. Thus ages passed, at length a sigh, a human sigh was heard, and the wind caught the passing tone of many a sorrowing word. He was a shipwrecked mariner, borne by the winds and waves, from where his comrades slept in death, deep in the ocean caves. He thought of home, he thought of all who once had loved him there. He thought how at their mother's knee his children knelt in prayer. He thought perhaps they prayed for him, and then he bowed his knee upon that little coral isle beneath the cocoa tree. God heard his prayer. From east, from west, lone isle or hidden grot, if there the voice of prayer ascends, by God 'tis unforgot. A vessel bore him from that spot to his far home once more, his the first foot, and his the last that trod that coral shore. The Hermit, the Chieftain, and the Child. A Tale about Happiness. It was a summer's evening, and the long shadows fell from tree and overhanging rock on old St. Ronan's Well. All round upon the old grey stones green ferns and mosses grew, and when the wind the branches moved, came gleams of sunshine through. There was a little cell hard by, and there a hermit dwelt, who now beside St. Ronan's Well upon the edge-stones knelt. And in a scallop shell he took a draught of water there. His hair was white, and on his brow were lines of grief or care. "For 30 years," said he, "I've drunk each evening from this well, but I am feeble now, and soon the grave will be my cell. I've listened to the waters fall, I've heard the breezes sigh, and through the creaking boughs at night the winter winds sweep by. I know each pathway through the woods, I've watched yon willows grow from saplings into aged trees down by the stream below. I thought that I should happy be, far from the haunts of men, with none to care for, none to fear, within this lonely glen. But with me this hath not been, for with myself at strife 60 long useless years I've passed, none better for my life." While thus he spoke, a footstep came. He started at the sound, for it was seldom other feet than his had trod that ground. There stood a steel-clad warrior by, leaning upon his lance, and from beneath his plumed helm he looked with earnest glance. "I've lived in courts and camps," he said, "I've travelled east and west, and yet I have not happy been. I've sought, but found no rest. I heard of thee, thou hermit old, and I had come to ask if thou wert happy, but thy words have spared me now the task." Just then they heard a gentle voice say, "Is this Ronan's Well?" And on a maiden's golden curls a ray of sunshine fell. She was a simple village child, meanly but cleanly clad, a picture of the rudest kind within her hands she had. "I've come," she said, "for many a mile, to seek St. Ronan's Well, because it hath a healing power, the country people tell. My mother hath been ill long time, but if she drink, they say, of this good water, it will take her sickness quite away." She filled her pitcher at the well, then at the old man's knee she knelt and said, "A blessing grant, good father, unto me." "And art thou happy, little maid?" the aged hermit said, as on her curling locks his hands to bless her forth he spread. "Happy," she said, "what does it mean? I labour all the day, but when the old tree's shadow falls, I run abroad to play. I work for mother. When I'm good at night, she gives a kiss. I know not what the happy means, unless that it be this." The old man sighed. "Sir Knight," said he, "we've sought in different ways, I in this forest solitude, thou midst the great world's praise, for happiness, but found it not. But, without search or thought, this little child hath found her bliss in doing what she ought." God is love. Oh, that I know indeed is true, for he has made the sky of blue, and spread the earth with quiet green, while azure waters flow between, because these colours are the best on which the wearied eye can rest. Oh yes, all tells us God is love, around, beneath us, or above. Round us are flowers that without care grow wildly, blooming everywhere, and noble trees, beneath whose shade the pale spring flowerets bloom and fade. Beneath us, deep within their bed, the precious gems and ores are spread. Diamonds and rosy rubies shine, and metals fill the secret mine. And that dark mass which we require at eve to light our cheerful fire. Above us is the glorious sun, and when his brighter course is run, The silvery moon looks forth, and makes a path of light o'er seas and lakes, and in the hushed and solemn night wander the starry worlds of light. Within us, as around, above, something still whispers, God is love. For he hath given us hearts to feel a gladness tongue cannot reveal. Vainly had beauty round us been, had we no minds to love the scene. End of Part 4. Part 5 of Poems for My Children by Anne HAWKSHAW. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Monk of Chester, a scene in the time of the Normans. A talk in Furness Abbey to J.C.H. A little girl's wish. The Monk of Chester, scene in the time of the Normans. Britons, Saxons and Normans have all contributed to form the English nation. For many good and brave men must die before a people can become great and wise. As no really good or great thing is ever done on this earth without trouble, you may be sure that if we have now wise laws and good institutions, many have toiled and suffered before we could enjoy them. Our rude Saxon chiefs, our old Norman kings, let them be honoured for whatever good thing they have given us. The Saxon Harold and the Norman William have long since passed away, but whatever good they did while living has left some trace on earth. Great deeds do not die. It is generally said Harold died at Hastings, but there is a tradition that he was not killed, but died in the time of Henry I, a monk at Chester. In Chester's ancient convent dim, slowly awoke the vesper hymn, and borne o'er many a verdant dale, it softly told its peaceful tale. Mildly the autumn sunshine fell on tomb, on effigy and shrine, while many a knight and abbot slept, with epitaph of uncouth line, their rudely chiselled tombs upon, in the old chapel of St. John. That evening came a lonely man, his pilgrim dress was travel-worn, his brow was scarred, his look like one who had much toil and sorrow borne. He sat him down beside the shrine, they asked him not from whence he came, he spoke not of his history, nor told his name, but said, I come, a wearied man, to seek a home, a grave with you, ask me not who or whence I am, with that you have not aught to do. And o'er his faded features passed a look of pride, it was the last, for meekly dwelt he from that day, a monk within their cloister grey. With heavy sighs oft shook his breast, strange dreams too oft disturbed his rest, and unconnected words would fall from his pale lips, as if in sleep his memory would the deeds recall he strove to hide so deep. Years passed, and he was bent with age, his glossy hair had turned to grey, when the first Henry o'er the land held regal sway, upon his dying couch he lay. The good monks stood around his bed, and watched and prayed. I die, he said, last branch of a far-spreading tree, doomed by the Norman axe to be hewn to the earth. It matters not, my dying brother, what thy lot hath been in other years, to thee just entering on eternity, but we, who through long years have seen what days of sorrow thine have been, would fain thy name and history know. Thus spake a monk in accents low, and bending o'er the dying man, in silence and in night they stood, for the curfew bell had sounded far o'er land and flood. 'Twas sad in darkness thus to stand, a mournful solitary band, around the bed of death. Thy name, tell us at least thy name, they said. Harold. They bent to hear again, but he was dead. A talk in Furness Abbey to J.C.H. "Mamma, my sister's gone, and I am left alone." "Then come, my boy, and sit by me upon this mossy stone, and let us talk of those who long since passed away. 'Tis well to think on other days mid ruins old and grey. For though now o'er the grass scarcely a footstep steals, once men dwelt here and lived and moved, feeling what man now feels. They were our brothers, though they lived in ages long ago, for they could joy like us and weep like us for human woe. Here round the wide stone hearth, with blazing faggots piled, they sat, while many a wondrous tale the wintry hours beguiled. Yonder the trout stream flows, still in its ancient bed. From it how many a savoury dish upon their board was spread. Beneath yon ruined arch, on which bright mosses creep, they bore the dead. In that green spot priest and crusader sleep, but now their very names are gone. We know they lived, they died. See, there the nameless warrior lies, with his lady at his side. Their age hath passed away, passed even as the chimes that filled this vale with pleasant tones. We live in other times, in other and in happier times, yet much of good was hid oft in those lonely halls, like gems beneath a coffin lid. How many a lone benighted guest hath passed beneath this door, how many a kindly hand hath fed upon yon step the poor. We ought not now, like those old monks, in abbey walls to dwell, but in all time there is the power to think and to do well. A Little Girl's Wish. I wish I had wings to fly away, 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 o'er the deep blue sea. I would go to each old and famous shore, where busy cities stood of yore, though silent now they be. I would go where Tadmore's ruins lie, amid the desert's drifting sand, and the lizards creep and the night winds moan, amid its temples overthrown by stern Aurelian's hand. I would go where the stately palm trees rise, and the Campanero's voice is heard, like the solemn sound of a convent bell, of the quiet hour of prayer to tell, when the leaves by the evening breeze are stirred, and where the bright flowers of the cactus spring from the clefts of the bare and sunburnt rocks, and where for miles from bough to bough the troops of chattering monkeys go, and the parrots fly in flocks. I would go too, where in northern skies upon their long and frosty nights, when through the pine wood howls the blast, and the rivers in ice are all bound fast, shoot bright and high the northern lights. And where upon the icy seas, around the north and southern pole, the stately icebergs to and fro, like rocks of glittering diamonds go, where the dark waves chance to roll. I would go when the birds of passage go, when the flowers are dead and the skies look grey. I would follow the swallow's unknown track, and like it in the spring again come back. Oh, I wish I had wings to fly away. End of Part 5. Part 6 of Poems for My Children by Anne Hawkshaw. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Sir Oswald's Return, a scene in the time of the Crusades. Ada. Sir Oswald's Return, a scene in the time of the Crusades. Part 1. 'Twas winter, and the snow fell fast. The setting sun looked dull and red. For shelter to the leafless boughs or old grey walls the birds had fled, when o'er a wild and trackless moor a solitary horseman passed, and on he urged his gallant steed to face the snowy blast. He wore a falcon for his crest, a red cross on his shield and breast. A knight was he, and that the sign that he had been to Palestine. Long years before, across that plain, 100 followers with him passed. Some on Judea's hills were slain, some perished by the Simoon's blast, and he alone was left, the last. And now he bent his lonely way to where he lived in childhood's day. A lonely castle, old and grey, built on a high projecting cliff that overlooked the northern sea, that foamed and thundered at its base. For miles there was no shrub or tree. It was a bleak and lonely spot, and yet he loved it better far than all the perfumed palmy vales in eastern lands that are. And oft beneath the starry skies of Syria's clime, so clear and bright, when sleep pressed down his wearied eyes, in dreams he stood upon that height, watching the seagull skimming o'er the crested wave or sandy shore. And when he woke and heard no sound but soft winds whispering through the palm that waved above his sleeping head, he would have given those airs of balm for one rude gale like that which now beat fiercely on his sunburnt brow. Onward he rode, more wildly blew the storm, and fast the snowflakes flew. But not of that Sir Oswald thought, for now his castle was in sight, and as if meant to guide him home, from many a window gleamed a light. "How will my Lady Edith look, and my young son? She scarce will know her husband with his furrowed brow. And my brave cousin, good Sir Child, I doubt not he hath faithful been and guarded well my Edith fair, as if she had been England's queen. And my old henchman Ethelstan, who served me when I was a boy, I wonder if he lives. How great will be the old man's joy to see his master home once more, never to leave his native shore." Thus to himself Sir Oswald spoke, and by that time he gained the beach. Wildly the waves upon it broke, and far as eye could reach, all whitened with the glittering spray, were the high rocks around the bay. There for a moment paused the knight, before he climbed the dangerous height on which his castle stood. His steed the sound of coming footsteps heard, and pricked his ears, for he good heed had learned to take when danger stirred. Nearer and nearer came the sound. Behind a rock Sir Oswald drew, and soon before him, on the shore, what sight of horror met his view! Seen in the dim uncertain light, for day was changing into night, 2 men in armour dragged along an old and venerable man, and a young child whose lip and cheek with fear were pale and wan, and placed them in a crazy boat, and pushed it forward to the sea. "Now seek thy father, boy," they said. "Thy path is wide and free." The child bent down his head and wept upon the old man's knee, and he looked up to heaven and said, "For this dark deed upon thy head, Sir Child, will curses be." Rude laughed Sir Child, and turned away, thinking he left them for a prey to the sea-wolves. The chilling spray dashed o'er the child, and in despair the old man tore his thin grey hair. But for one moment paused the night, till dark Sir Child was out of sight. Then dashed into the waves, and brought the fair and slender boy to shore. "Now once again, my steed," he said, "and then thy toils are o'er." The good horse reached the boat again, and safe the old man bore. "Know'st thou the Falcon Crest, old man?" Sir Oswald said. "I do not ask if thou wouldst know thy master now, for that would be a different task, for war and toil have left their trace in many a line upon his face." The old man dropped upon his knee. "My eyes are dim, I cannot see amid this gloom thy noble brow, but 'tis thy voice. That voice, I trow, has never left me year by year, though never thought again to hear. Come, child, and kiss thy father's hand, whom we deemed slain in Holy Land." The boy drew back, as if in fear, but in the knight's dark eyes a tear stood trembling as he clasped his child, who, reassured, looked up and smiled, and said, "Now mother will not weep, nor I and my good Ethelstan be left to die upon the deep." "Where is my lady?" said the knight. The old man to the castle looked, and pointed where a single light gleamed faintly from a distant tower. "There sits your lady at this hour, weeping her weary life away, while in your halls Sir Child hath sway." "False kinsman, vengeance on thy head will surely rest," Sir Oswald said. "But seek some shelter for the child, good henchman, for the night is wild. I and my steed will now away, my errand will not bear delay." So saying, up the rocky height he sprung, and soon was out of sight. Part 2. Sir Oswald reached the castle gate. "Who knocks?" the warder said. "'Tis late for guest, and if no guest thou art, from hence 'twere better to depart. We do not suffer strangers here. This castle hath some shapes of fear, as well unseen by strangers' sight. I give thee warning, and good night." "I thank thee for thy warning, friend, but further onward cannot wend. For food and shelter much have need, both rider and his jaded steed," the knight replied. "Not thus of yore did stranger parley at this door. Not close to either friend or foe it was, on such a night, I trow." "Knowest thou my lord?" the warder said. "My own good lord, in Syria dead?" "Ay, know him as I know myself," Sir Oswald said. "Then thou shalt be tended as meets his friend by me, though on the morrow I'll be thrown for it into the sea." And open wide the gate he swung. Upon the courtyard pavement rung the good knight's armour, as he sprung from off his horse, and once again trod in his own and old domain. He from his face undid his casque. "Now, Randolph, dost thou know thy lord?" The warder gazed in fright, and said, "What? Hath the grave its dead restored, and sent thee, messenger of wrath, to haunt thy guilty kinsman's path? But oh, if spirits can be kind, and thou canst visit yon grey tower, be gentle there as summer rain, when falling on a broken flower, for there a broken flower is dying." "Randolph," the knight replied, "be still, and listen, for the time is flying. I am no spirit, but a man, Sir Oswald, lord of this domain, a Red Cross knight from Palestine, resolved to have his own again, or perish. Till the mid of night I'll keep me from my kinsman's sight, while thou shalt tell to those who still are ready to obey my will, that I am here, and at that hour will meet them by the western tower. Meanwhile thy fire and evening meal I'll share, for the night wind like steel cuts through my frame, unused to bear the rough kiss of your northern air. God help my child who hath to share this night, perhaps the sea-calf's den, but better there than in the home of wicked men." Randolph a pile of faggots threw upon the fire, and then withdrew, to spread among the vassal train news of their lord returned again, while the knight, full of anxious thought, sat listening for the midnight chime. Whoever sat in solitude, waiting for coming time, and did not feel the solemn power there is in such a watching hour. 'Tis midnight, the rude festival hath ceased, and silent is the hall. Sir Child in heavy slumber lies, before the failing fire. Around his guests and followers, wrapped in sleep, lie stretched upon the ground, for wine and weariness combined in slumber deep to steep each mind. Trusty Randolph cautiously mustered by the western tower all the followers of his lord at the appointed hour. One and all had joyfully responded to the call, and silently they follow now their chieftain to the hall. The porter at a signal given did the bolts undo, the oaken door fell back, and all passed quickly through. "Bind yon traitor," said the knight, pointing to Sir Child, "but shed no blood of his, for he hath shared in boyish days my home and bread." They bound, and to a darksome vault, reached by a secret stair, conveyed and left him on the floor, to waken in despair. And now loud shouts of warfare ring throughout the bloody hall, as man to man and foe to foe they fight and fall, Once on the floor Sir Oswald sunk, o'erpowered by many foes, and, but for noble Randolph's aid, had died beneath their blows. He sprung before his honoured lord, received the blow of death, and fell. How many a faithful follower then thus died, of whom no records tell? That matters not, for if the deed be good, it hath but little need of earthly records for its meed. Ere morning dawned, the fight was done. Sir Oswald had his castle won, and when the evening fire again gleamed brightly in the ancient hall, where now the red cross banner waved in triumph from the wall, old Ethelstan led in the child, and placed him on his mother's knee, who clasped him with a long embrace, and tears fell fast and free. "Bring forth Sir Child," Sir Oswald said. They led the traitor to his lord. Each brow frowned darkly, and each hand was ready on his sword, and hate and scorn each face revealed, for now they thought his doom was sealed. "Go," said Sir Oswald, "go and seek forgiveness of thy crimes from heaven. I do forgive thee, as I hope by God to be forgiven. But in this realm thou must not stay. Seek distant lands, be gone, away." They all fell back as out he passed, with hurried footsteps from the hall. None spoke or moved, until no more they heard that footsteps fall. Years passed. Sir Oswald's hair was grey, yet strong of heart and limb was he, and often with his youthful son went to the chase right merrily. It chanced one day the good knight rode alone upon that silent shore, where he had found old Ethelstan and his young son of yore. And he rode thinking of that time, or listening to the sea waves chime. He reached a cavern in the cliff, and there he saw an aged man, kneeling beside a crucifix. His cheek was pale and wan. A palmer's dress he wore, and oft the tears stole down his aged face, on which an eastern sun had left its burning trace. "Give me thy blessing, holy man," Sir Oswald said, and bent his knee. "I am a sad and sinful man," replied he, "though once a brave and gallant knight of high degree. For years I've wandered o'er the earth, with pilgrim scrip and scallop shell. I've knelt by many a famous shrine, I've drunk from many a holy well, I've sat upon Mount Olivet, on mournful Calvary I've wept, and by the Jordan's sacred banks have laid me down and slept. But still no peace I've found, no rest, still dark and guilty is my breast. No strength have I to wander now, nor hope that penances will save. Now I will pray to God alone, and here will find a grave, here, by the side of this wild sea, that tales of other years to me tells with its ceaseless melody." And then for years he lived alone, nor sought for converse with mankind. Yet the benighted wanderer oft with him would food and shelter find. More tranquil and more mild he grew, as in his solitude he dwelt, and ever at the midnight hour upon the shore to pray he knelt. At length Sir Oswald died. In state they laid him in a chapel near. Wax tapers gleamed and banners waved around the warrior's bier. That night the hermit left his cell, and slowly sought that burial place. More feeble than was wont his step, yet tranquil was his face. It seemed as if the gloom had passed from off his furrowed brow at last. "I come to watch beside this bier," he said, and as he passed along, a murmuring sound of blessings came from the assembled throng. A faint smile passed across his face, as at the bier he took his place. Next morn they found him, cold and dead. his hands were folded on his breast, and calm and happy now he looked, like tired wanderer sunk to rest. Between his folded hands they found a ring, his name and crest. They laid him in their chieftain's tomb, that aged hermit of the wild, and on that tomb 2 names were graved, Sir Oswald and Sir Child. Ada. Ada, the flowers of spring are blooming now, the flowers we talked of in the wintry hours, when at my feet thou sat'st, thy thoughtful brow and fair face turned to mine. We talked of flowers, spring's sunny days, and birds amid the trees, themes that thy gentle heart could ever please. And they are here, but thou art gone, my child, and even the sunshine seems a mournful thing to my sad heart that flattering hope beguiled, to look with gladness to the coming spring. For in those hours I had no secret dread, gazing on thee I thought not of the dead. The snow was on the ground, the biting blast swept the bare earth, when in the ground we laid thee, our first smitten flower. But they have passed, and earth again in beauty is arrayed. Oh, that the sunbeam could awaken the flower that withered by me in that bitter hour. It cannot be. Ah me, how much of woe in the few words are hidden. I shall see thee here no more, till now I did not know. Yet doth one thought bring comfort e'en to me. Thou art my child, my Ada still. Not death can wither love, e'en with his blighting breath. No, he but purifies it, 'tis no more of earth or time, but of eternity. Time cannot now my hopes or joys restore, and earth can offer nought, dear one, to thee. 'Tis love, unmingled with all meaner dreams of pride or selfishness or earthly schemes. Therefore I will not say to thee farewell. No, none shall fill thy place within my heart. There love for thee and thoughts of thee shall dwell, until we meet again to never part. A spirit dwelling in a home above, it is a sweet and solemn thing to love. End of Part 6. End of Poems for My Children by Anne Hawkshaw.